Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today we're doing a bit of a guide on Topaz and our best boy, Numby. This character is a fire DPS with the hunt path, meaning that she's going to be a single target fire DPS, which is overall very good, but she does have a bit of an interesting mechanic which you wouldn't expect from a fire single target DPS. But without further ado, let's get into her kit. Starting off, her basic attack is just a single hit of fire damage, so we won't look at that. But her skill is rather powerful, causes a single enemy to enter the proof of debt state and increases target's damage received from follow-up attacks by a whopping 50%, which is extremely powerful support capabilities so far. Furthermore, proof of debt only takes effect on the most recent target it is applied to and can only be applied to one target at a time, which is all very good. But there's a bit of quality of life here. So at the start of an ally's turn or during an ally's action, if there is no proof of debt on the field, Topaz will just automatically apply proof of debt to a random enemy, which is very quality of life as, well, if your Topaz doesn't have enough speed, you'll just have proof of debt on the field without having to use her skill for it, which is incredible. Now, the actual damage portion of the skill is 150% of fire damage of her attack to this target, and then the skill's damage is considered as rather launching a follow-up attack, so she only does follow-up attack damage, which is really good. The skill, very, very powerful. But that is not all that proof of debt does. Proof of debt actually ties into her talent, which is what we'll get into now, which is going to be a core part of her gameplay, which is Trotter Market. Much like Jing Yuan, who summons the Lightning Lord, Topaz summons Numby at the start of the battle with a default of 80 speed, unlike Jing Yuan's Lightning Lord that has a variable of speed depending on how many stacks he has. Numby has just a default 80. Which is fine. Furthermore, when taking action, Numby only does follow-up attack damage on a single target enemy afflicted with proof of debt, and this is where proof of debt management is going to be pretty interesting with this character, as you're going to want to have it on the primary target, I guess, and 150% of Topaz's attack as fire damage as single target damage, so her talent and her skill have the same percent value, so her talent is like using a skill and vice versa, which is all great. Going further, when enemies afflicted with proof of debt receive an ally's follow-up attack, Numby's action is advanced by 50%, which is really cool. Synergizing follow-up attack characters like Jing Yuan, Herta, and Topaz may prove to be very useful, as you'll be able to get more hits from Numby, generally speaking. And then continuing, the action advance forward cannot be triggered during Numby's own turn, so Numby can't trigger his own advance forward. So you'll have to have him have a turn, and then Jing Yuan will have to trigger the next 50% and so on and so forth. And then when Topaz is downed, obviously Numby will disappear, which is fine. Very good character, as we can tell, but it is a single target follow-up attack based character, similar to Jing Yuan, but works slightly differently with a bit of action advancement forward, default 80 speed, and it's all single target focused, which is, I would say, very, very powerful. The ultimate, though, Turn a Profit, goes into a bit of a different direction. It is an enhancement ultimate. So Numby enters the Windfall Bonanza state, and its damage multiplier increases by 150, and the crit damage increases by 25%, which is extremely powerful and extremely potent for just an ultimate. And then also, when enemies with the Proof of Debt receive an attack from an ally's basic, skill, or ultimate attack, so any of them, regardless of their follow-up, just a regular basic, a regular skill, or a regular ultimate attack, Numby's action is advanced forward by 50%, and then after two uses of, or two attacks rather, Numby will exit the Windfall Bonanza state. Very powerful ultimate, although only for two attacks of Numby, Numby's going to do an incredible amount of damage with this, and it's very powerful if you think about the advanced action forward from the ultimate in tandem with the talent. You'll be able to get 100% action forwarding if you use specific characters. Per se, let's say a Jing Yuan, and then Jing Yuan Lightning Lord hits, that's Numby going straight away because he's just had 100%, because 50 from ultimate and 50 from talent. Very powerful. Numby's going to be attacking quite frequently, well, at least more frequently than the Lightning Lord is. And I'm reluctant to mention the technique, but because it is a part of her kit, I will, because it's a pretty underwhelming one for most of the game. But summon Numby when Topaz enters the world. Numby will automatically search for basic treasures and trotters in a set radius, so you have a bit of open world exploration capacity there. The combat part of it is that when Numby attacks for the first time in the next battle, Topaz automatically regenerates 60 energy, which is pretty good, but not too useful, as it doesn't really do anything other than just a bit of energy regen, much like Ting Yun's technique. Furthermore, you have some simulated universe and open world specific ones. So the open world, if you use her technique and Topaz survives that fight, you get an extra bit of currency to a total of 10,000 per day extra currency, which is the credits. And then the simulated universe one is after using her technique and defeating enemies in the simulated universe, you'll receive a small amount of extra cosmic fragments and a small chance for a random curio. Overall, the technique is useful, but if you're looking for some sort of combat potency, you're probably not going to get much here. If you're looking for a bit of utility in the simulated universe, it's fine, as well as a bit of extra money, it's also fine. And quickly covering the bonus abilities, because these are also quite good in my opinion. The first one, technical adjustment, after Numby uses an attack while in the ultimate state called Windfall Bonanza, Topaz regenerates 10 energy, very powerful, a lot more energy for your ultimate, and the ultimate cycles into itself, so very good. Number 2, Financial Turmoil increases Topaz and Numby's damage dealt to enemies with a fire weakness by 15%, so emphasizes using her in the correct situation, but also emphasizes the extreme use of Silverwolf, who will be able to help you apply fire weakness and thus make just the whole game much easier. And then the final one, Overdraft. When Topaz uses her basic attack to deal damage, it will be considered a follow-up attack, which is also very useful, as all the damage that Topaz does is now considered a follow-up attack, which leads into the whole thing being much stronger. Her synergy with Numby and Numby with her is extremely powerful, and her SU potential with the Elation Tree skyrockets with this ability. Overall, Topaz is a pretty fucking good character. Pardon my use of language there, but a very, very good character. Synergizes with herself very well. Numby and Topaz work well as you'd expect. Follow-up attack from Numby causes Topaz to be better, and then her follow-up attack damage causes Numby to be better and have actions more frequently. And then in general, the ultimate will enhance both of them to a certain degree, obviously, because obviously then Topaz's basic attack skill or ultimate will then cause Numby to have an action advancement forward by 100% because it's a skill, but also a follow-up attack. So you can see the synergy between the character in of itself, which is very, very good. You like to see that with a character. It's very, very nice. But now let's see if the Eidolons are worth it. So starting off with E1, Future Market. When enemies afflicted with Proof of Debt receive a follow-up attack, they will enter the debtor state. This can only take effect one time in a single action. The debtor state then increases the crit damage from follow-up attacks dealt to affected enemies by 25%, stacking up to 2 times, and then when Proof of Debt is removed, so is the debtor state, which is actually a pretty powerful damage Eidolon as an E1, as theoretically on a single target enemy, pure single target, you can get a total of 50% crit damage increase to specifically follow-up attacks. Now that is the big caveat with Topaz, is that a lot of it is just purely follow-up attack damage increasing or a requirement of follow-up attacks to be present, which is a kind of a positive, negative, depending on your perspective, but that is E1 pretty powerful. Going on to E2, Bonafide Acquisition. After Numby takes action and launches an attack, Topaz regenerates an extra 5 energy, feeding into the ultimate, feeding into the power, feeding into the damage. Overall, it's fine. Eidolon 4, Agile Operation. After Numby's turn begins, Topaz's action is advanced forward by 20%, a rather powerful one in E4 as the cycle of using them together advances forward even more and becomes more powerful, as then Topaz's actions lead into Numby's actions because of the 50% and this is 20%. And so you can see the kind of the fast-paced combat that you'll have with Topaz and Numby at E4. But again, that's E4. Pretty expensive. Then finally, E6, Incentive Mechanism. As you'd expect, a very powerful one. Numby's attack count while in the Windfall Bonanza state increases by 1, and then the fire penetration or the fire resistance penetration increases by 10% during the attacks. A pretty good Eidolon, not the strongest E6 that we've ever seen, but it does have a bit of fire resistance penetration, which is what you'd like to see in some parts of the kit, but also that Windfall Bonanza extension is extremely powerful, as 99% of the time you'll be able to, once the Windfall Bonanza ends, go straight back into the Windfall Bonanza, or maybe even have a perpetual Windfall Bonanza state on your Numby because of the energy regen and then just having turns and so on and so forth. So overall, an extremely powerful E6, but you may need to have a specific type of build or a specific type of playstyle in place to actually utilize it well. Eidolon-wise, I think her best Eidolon is number 1. You'll get the most amount of damage from having just this Eidolon. If you keep on going further, you're obviously going to get bonuses, but the further you go, the lower the value is until you get to E6, where you get a massive amount of value. So my recommendation, if you're investing in this character, E1 is probably the stopping point. But if you're not thinking about investing, then E0 is just fine. You'll be able to get extreme amounts of value from this character at E0. Pretty useful, pretty good as a single target follow-up attack DPS. Now, going on to her best in slot light cone, Worrisome Blissful. This one is going to be her signature and her best, as it is made for her. One at a time is the ability, and it increases the wearer's crit rate by 18% and damage from follow-up attacks by 30%. So pretty much it is handcrafted for her. Then furthermore, after the wearer unleashes a follow-up attack, apply the trauma state to the target, stacking up to 2 times. When allies hit enemies under the tame state, every tame stack will increase the crit damage they receive by 12%. Obviously, if you 2 stacks with that, that's 24% with 2 stacks, which is overall very powerful. Now, this is obviously going to be her best in slot, but there's one thing I want to say about the light cone in a general sense, is that this light cone is not going to be one that you may want to invest in unless you have Topaz. Now, let me explain why. A lot of the stuff here is based on the character, the wearer, being able to unleash a follow-up attack. As we can see, crit rate by 18%, that's very useful, but then follow-up attack by 30%. Not many hunt characters have a follow-up attack. Sealy doesn't. Yanqing does, but it's RNG based, and furthermore, the hunt characters don't have follow-up attacks as many as you'd think. And then this last part is where you might get misunderstood. After the wearer unleashes a follow-up attack, apply the tame state to the target. Essentially, if you put this on a character that does not have a follow-up attack, you will not get that last part, which is extremely powerful, which is the tame state, and then the 12%, 24% crit damage received. So be very careful when rolling on this light cone. It may sound a bit misleading, so just be a bit careful. If you get Topaz, this light cone is going to be really good, but she can also thrive with others, but other characters cannot thrive with this light cone. As for the rest of the light cones and which one will work just fine, well, the rest of the 5 stars work just fine. In the night, Sleep Like the Dead and Cruising in the Stellar Sea, it really depends on which one you have and which one you want to use on her. If your Sealy has In the Night, don't take it off Sealy. If your Yanqing has the Sleep Like the Dead, don't take it off him. But if you don't have those characters, but you have their respective light cones, any of them will work just fine depending on the situation. As for the 4 stars though, I believe her best in slot is going to be Swordplay. I could be proven wrong by this due to the numbers, but this one at least sounds the best to me, as Topaz does have a bit of an emphasis on pure single target and focusing one target down due to the proof of debt state that she applies. And much like we can read with the Swordplay light cone, for each time the wearer hits the same target, the damage dealt increases by 8%, stacking up to 5 times. This is dispelled when the wearer changes targets. There's a massive emphasis on staying on one target. So to me, this one sounds like the best one for her if you have no other options. Now, obviously, I should say is that all the other light cones from the hunt category do work just fine. You're not going to have any bad ones here. Maybe only Return to Darkness, as Return to Darkness is a bit of a weird one. But generally speaking, all the hunt light cones work just fine. I'm just going to recommend Swordplay for now. And then finally, going on to relics and planar ornaments, the obvious one is going to be the Firesmith of Lava Forging. That's going to be the biggest recommendation, as she does only fire damage, and then increase skill damage by 12% after unleashing ultimate, increase the wearer's fire damage by 12% for the next attack. Overall, that's going to give you the most value, and the obvious answer for planar is going to be Inert Cell Soto, crit rate by 8, and then at 50, you get ultimate and follow-up attack damage increase by 15. That's pretty much the only answer, as Topaz only does follow-up attack damage with her skill and her basic attack, as well as then Numby. So you're going to want to increase all of that. She only does follow-up attack damage. So that's the one that is going to be recommended the most. Now, I'm not sure why this website, Hakush, I'm not why it recommends a Longevous Disciple. I think this is a bit of a situational recommendation. Longevous Disciple is only here under the assumption that you use this character with the future character, Mrs. Jing Liu, who has the ability to drain your team's HP. So I'm not sure if you should be using Longevous Disciple. Leave that up for when the character launches and testing. I'm just doing a recommendation right now. The biggest ones are going to be Firesmith and Inert Cell Soto. As for the planar ornaments, you could use any of these depending on what you have the best pieces for, but the best recommendation and the best in slot is going to be Inert Cell Soto and Firesmith of Lava Forging. After that, you probably could do Musketeer of Wild Wheat. Is it going to work just fine? Absolutely. Is it going to be my recommendation? Absolutely not. Firesmith and Inert Cell Soto are going to be the best for you. As for stats, obviously just go for the most DPS stats. She's just a DPS character. The boots are obviously interchangeable with speed and attack percentage. You're probably going to get better early value out of speed boots, but endgame value is most likely to be attack percentage. And as for the rest of them, the planar orb is going to be fire damage, as the planar rope is going to be attack percentage. It's pretty standard for a main DPS. Okay, finally, let's go into characters that Topaz and Numby will work well with. Well, it's no wrong statement to say that it's pretty much only follow-up attack characters, as Topaz has supporting capabilities of quite prominently. So she's a supporting DPS or a DPS with a lot of supporting capabilities, whatever way you want to look at it. But characters that really only have follow-up attack is going to be comboed with her, with the occasional healer or tank if you want some extra survivability. So characters like Jinyuan, Blade, Kafka, Herta, along those lines, if they have a follow-up attack, very easily to trigger. That's also going to be a very big caveat that I'm going to put on this, is that if it's easy to trigger their follow-up attack, if it's tedious, if it's very, kind of like Herta's is actually pretty bad, I'll be honest. I wouldn't combo Herta. She just has a follow-up attack that you can trigger. But if it's easy to trigger their follow-up attack, then I would recommend them. Even further, going with characters that have it in an Eidolon. I know a few characters. I think it's Bronya that unlocks one through an Eidolon. So I'd recommend these characters as, well, obviously it makes sense. I wouldn't combo a Nihility character with it. Doesn't make sense. So just follow-up attack characters with the occasional healer. It doesn't really matter what healer, but try to make it to the same element. If not the same element, a neutral element like Quantum or Imaginary. I was about to say Infinity for some reason. Quantum or Imaginary healer if you don't have the same element as her. But that's pretty much the character in a nutshell. Very powerful, very good, and I'd recommend rolling for her if you have a character like Jinyuan or Blade, as they are two of the best follow-up attack characters right now, at least. So if you have either of them, I'd recommend Topaz. If you're not rolling for Topaz and you're saving for someone else, maybe like a Jing Liu, well, best of luck on your rolls, and best of luck on everyone's rolls in the future. If you enjoyed the video, like and sub, and I'll catch you guys in the next guide.